What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Reseller Greatness Podcast. Today, I am joined by Rachel, and I am getting second pickings at Rachel because Rachel has done a previous podcast to this with my good friend Johnny Bean, the used book guy, which I enjoyed very much. That was out a few weeks ago. If you haven't caught that one, catch that one after this one. And everything that Rachel shared, I thought was very enlightening. I enjoy Rachel, she does the Poshmark call for us in the group, and I go there. That is like BOLO central for a guy like me because I know men's clothes, I know vintage clothes, but my women's clothes, I can always use a little bit of tightening up, a little freshening up on, and you always come with the heat on the Poshmark call. Between you, Dana, and Stasia on the show and tell, oh my goodness, every
Yeah.
single week it's like a BOLO brand overload, but how you doing, Rachel? You're from California. You do a fantastic job. You sell over $100,000 a year. Very, very, very knowledgeable inside of your craft, inside of your niche. So that's why I got you on here today. So tell the fine folks who you are, what you do, anything you want them to know about you, and then we get into it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Was looking forward to it. Sorry about doing Johnny B's podcast first. I'm Rachel. I coach our Poshmark call on Fridays in the group, and I live in the LA area, and I have been reselling since 2016 and since 2017, pretty much full time. I've done a lot of different things in my life. I've been in retail, I've been in finance, I've worked for nonprofit organizations. But this is the first time I can honestly say, like, I ran my own business and I do everything on my own terms, and I hope to never have a boss again other than
Nice,
myself.
nice.
Yeah, I mean it's my life has been a lot of up and down and kind of round and round, and but I've always loved shopping. I have a bit of a shopping addiction, or had, I should say. And I like I was not really doing well in the business I was in, and I wasn't very happy. But because I love shopping, I was like, well, how can I monetize my shopping habit? And so, I started shopping for things to sell specifically, just so I could have some income coming in. And then when I saw how easily I was able to sell things and how that took off, and that was in 2016, 2017, I actually quit what I was doing. I carried it for about 6 or 8 months. And then I was like, you know what? I'm making more money reselling and I'm enjoying myself much, much more. And so I let that other business go, which was in finance. I was actually a fully licensed financial advisor. But I got into the business in sort of a strange way. So that's kind of like my history behind selling. I got on Poshmark in 2016. I actually had downloaded the app. I think it was actually in 2013. I downloaded the app and signed up because somebody sent me a referral code. And they give like $5 or $10. And I
Sure.
signed up and I literally never used it. I never opened it. I never shopped on it. I completely forgot about it. And then in 2016, for some reason, it came back up on my radar. And this is a pretty common story. So they must have been doing maybe some advertising or something around that time, because it sort of started to come up on a lot of people's radar. And so I started selling in 2016. I had no idea what I was doing. Poshmark is a very, different beast from a lot of other reselling platforms, right? And there's the sharing aspect, there's this really big social component, and I'm not really a big social media person. So I was just posting stuff and it was selling. I wasn't sharing anything, I wasn't following anyone, I wasn't doing any of the things. And then they had the Poshfest convention was here in LA that same year. So I was like, well, since it's here and I only have to buy a ticket and I don't, ticket to the event, and I don't have to get on an airplane, I don't have to stay in a hotel, like maybe I'll go. And I went and I met another Poshmark, an OG Posher, somebody who'd been there since like day one. And she gave me a closet consultation. And I left there with so many nuggets that I went from about 1,700 followers on the app in October to 35,000 followers on the app in January. And then it kind
Wow.
of just took off from there.
So how does one get followers first and foremost? And I'll be first one to raise my hand. For a long time, I didn't know if it was Poshmark or Poshmark. So like
Yeah.
my Poshmark expertise is not there. So how did you jump in all of those followers? Was it being involved or was it just listing awesome stuff?
So, all the followers I had in the very beginning were just organic followers. Like when you first sign up, I think Poshmark has a thing where like all the employees follow the new closets. So you automatically get like a few hundred followers. And then everything else I had up until October was totally organic. So it was literally for me not doing anything other than just listing items. But I learned some things from Brenda, the other person I spoke to at PoshFest, and she had given me some tips on how to increase those followers. And so I started using a lot of her ideas, one of which was to go in and follow and share items from uh, users with really big closets and lots of followers. Because what happens is there's this reciprocal like sharing and following
Hmm.
component. So usually if you share and follow someone, then they share and follow you. So I just started following lots and lots of people and sharing items from closets that had like, 150,000 followers, 200,000 followers. And so I was able to grow my followers much more quickly that way. And then in addition, of course, I was also still listing items. So now today I have, I think just under 600,000 followers.
Wow.
So yeah, over half a million.
So what does the followers, is that any direct correlation to like the number of items you're gonna sell? Like what is the importance of the followers? What are they there for?
So when you share your items on Poshmark has their main page is like a feed. And so when you
Sure.
share your items, they're coming up in this feed. It's like a ticker. It's like rolling all day long. And so when you share, it goes to all of the people who follow you in their feed. Now, the reality is most people don't shop from their feed. However, if you're sharing your items constantly, you're keeping them at the top of the searches. So if somebody searches for your item and there's 100 of them listed, but you just shared yours 10 seconds ago, yours is going to be the very first one on that list because the default is by just shared. So when a buyer goes in to buy something and they do an organic search, whatever they're looking for, whatever, white button up, if you've shared yours, the default is going to be yours is on top. Now they can also filter those and change the way they see the things in their search coming up.
Sure. So for eBay, they have the default best match. So for that one, it's default most recently shared.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask a hard-hitting question. Would eBay be a better platform if there was a search for recently shared?
I don't think so. Because I mean, if you think about it too, eBay does have some because there are people who want to search to see what the newest thing is that
Newly
came in,
listed?
and you can search by, newly listed on eBay. And so that's kind of the same thing. Like sometimes when I'm looking for certain items, like I want to know it was just listed because like if I'm sniping or
Sure,
something, I
sure.
might want to snipe that item, before anyone else sees it. So I do use that search. Do I think that like just I don't know. I think best match. I often wish that Poshmark had a better
Had a
best match
best match.
because I think that it can be frustrating for buyers because they put in a few keywords and they get a lot of items that don't match their search. Sometimes, and it's been up and down. The search has been very bad, then it's been better, then it's been just a little bad, and they haven't quite figured that out over there, unfortunately. So I think in that way, maybe eBay has the the
So
upper hand.
how do you navigate that as a business trying to grow and do better when sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good? Is it the same way how like sometimes eBay is working good and sometimes eBay isn't working good and you just hey, trust the process, keep listing items and hopefully they get it figured out?
Yeah, and much like eBay, if you list a really good item at a good price and you list it correctly, your buyers will find it.
They'll find it.
I try not to list very saturated things, which is one of the reasons I think I've done well because the problem with these saturated items is if there's, 500 of them and they're
Sure,
being shared all day long, like
sure.
even though you just listed or you just shared it, like it can get pushed down so quickly that, it's not worth it. And then it's a very much a race to the bottom because shipping doesn't factor in because it's the same price for shipping mostly across the board. So I try to list items that are not too heavily saturated. I try to list brands that are not too heavily saturated, but are in demand. And I feel like, because I know how to list them and I'm listing in demand items, my buyers find my items, even with all the the sharing and the following and all that
So I
craziness.
think like what you say is the truth because you do list items that are very high quality, very high in demand, and not saturated. So a lot of people like that's the dream for a lot of people, list those kind of items. How are you able to find high in demand items that are not very saturated?
Well, I have a very strong passion for fashion. So a personal passion, like I always have, that goes hand in hand with the, the shopping. And so I feel like I'm always learning, and that means that every time I go out sourcing, I find a brand that's new to me. And a lot of people will ask me like, how do you like, how can you tell that that's a thing, you should look
Hmm.
up? And I think there's a lot of qualities that higher end items share, like in appearance. Like, I'm a very tactile person. I know a lot about textiles. I actually have a very deep background in textiles. I was a fiber artist. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in textiles. And so, like, I can often recognize either visually or by touch high quality textiles. I look for silk, I look for wool, I look for cotton, I look for cashmere. And I mean, I can spot a cashmere sweater from like across the room
Sure,
just by the way
absolutely.
it looks. And so
Hmm.
that's a big component for me. And then also like the tags, I mean the quality of the way the garment is made, the way the tags look and are attached, like a lot of high-end items or garments, they don't stitch their tags all the way around. They might just tack down the top two corners or all four corners. Often those high-end items have lost their tags or they're detached for that exact reason. So
Yep.
I will come across those items really often, but as long as they have their care and content tag, I can usually identify them. I have been known to identify brands, like even if somebody has cut the tag out and just left like the little corners, like my friend
Yeah.
posted one yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's Dolce and Gabbana. And
Yeah, I
sure
could do
enough,
that
she
with Polo
goes
too.
to
Polo
the,
no tag,
yep,
I know what it is.
yep. I'm like, yep, I know what that is. That's free people. That's that. So, so I've spent a lot of time honing those parts of how I search versus like just focusing on brands. I do focus on brands when I purchase, but when I'm sourcing, I try to keep my mind really open. And I don't go looking for certain brands. I was talking about this in my call a couple weeks ago, and it's like how quickly your brain can process information.
Yeah.
And so, I think this is where my ADHD comes in handy because I get hyper focused when I'm in the store, and my brain is just processing all of the different pieces of information that from the textile to the tag to the
Yeah.
way the inside, because you're usually looking at the collar or the waistband of something, and like the way that garment is constructed and how the seams are finished and all of those components. And I've spent a lot of time handling things, even things like I can't really afford to buy. I will go into those stores. I will look at the real thing. I will look at the inside. I will look at where the serial numbers are normally located if it's like a luxury item. But and I'm also like really big on getting like really good deals on things. So I love to shop for high-end things at discount. And so I'm able to handle a lot of that stuff, which has really just kind of helped me figure out like when I come across something I don't know, to stop and say, hey, throw this in the cart. We're gonna look it up at the end to see if it's something. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
And sure. So like for men's clothing, like I'll look at something and I'll say, okay, this is a tag from the 90s. It's 50/50 cotton polyester blend. It's single stitch. It has this type. So you can process all these things just like that. So when you are picking up an item where you're not familiar with it, you don't know the brand or whatever, you've already rattled off some of the ones. You're gonna look for content, you're gonna look for material, you're going to look for the way the tag is stitched on, perhaps country of manufacture, the style of the tag. Because from watching your call, like sometimes the plain Jane tags, like just very plain tags, like that's a given where like, and then also like the very fancy tags can be a given. So like all these little check boxes in our head are like,
Yeah.
is this worth picking up or is this not worth picking up? And maybe we want to do a little bit of research on it just based on all of these check marks and all these calculations that we're doing immediately. And something that my wife and I we do a lot is we'll go to the mall too, and we'll go to like Neiman Marcus, and we'll go to like Last Call, whatever one that was, and you go in there and like the price of this stuff is crazy.
Yeah, it's insane
It's
what the
like
retail prices are on something.
$8,000 for a vest, but you could have it today for like 450 bucks. But like you want to get in there, you want to look at it, you want to see the tags, does it have extra buttons? What kind of zipper are they using? Just touch it and even smell it sometimes because like that
Yep.
stuff smells like money. So like I go in there and that's how I learned a lot of brands, especially women's brands. I learned a lot of brands by going to like those Last Call and those off sacks just by going in there and looking at everything. So like you said you shop um you shop by brand and then you buy by style. So for men's, heavily brand.
Yeah.
For
Brand is
women's,
always heavy.
yeah, for men's it's heavily brand because I could have this shirt, but if it had a Harley tag on it, now I got to pick it up. No Harley tag, I'm out. So like for you, how important is brand? How important is style? Will you pick up a good brand that has a bad style? Will you pick up a good style that has a bad brand?
Um, I like to never use never and always because I don't think there are any hard and fast rules. I've done both of those things. I have picked up items by brand that were like, I've looked at them and gone, this is so not cute, but it has the brand. Sometimes if I come across those items and I really think that they may be challenging to sell, that may be a place where I go and I look to see if there are any sold comps for that exact item. Because I have had that kind of bite me in the behind before where like I've picked up something based on brand. It wasn't cute, look, or it didn't photograph well, and then I had trouble selling it. On the other hand, I have also picked up things that are like maybe lower end brands or like maybe doesn't even have a brand, but it's like a super cute, like on trend, item. Like I've picked up vintage items like that. And as long as I have enough good keywords to work with, I will sell them. So I never say never or always. I do think though, even in women's, brand trumps most things. But it can't just be brand. Like it has to be brand and something else, like brand and like it's a unique item. That's the other thing. And I just want to mention this too, is like I think about the fact that most shoppers are shopping in a 1 by 1 inch square, right?
That's
They're
crazy.
looking
One
at,
by one
yeah.
inch.
Yeah. So they're looking at your items on their phones, right? So if your item is boring or your photograph is dark and hard to see, they're just going to scroll right past you because that's how fast it's happening, right? If there's a bunch of things. So when I shop, I do tend to look for things that are a little more unique, maybe have like really beautiful colors. Like if it's not like a brand like, I don't know, Brunello Cucinelli or Loro Piana or one of these ones where you know that buyer's always searching by brand. But if that brand maybe has a lot of items, I'm looking for that item that is going to stand out when that person is looking through all those 1 by 1 inch squares. So,
That
yeah.
because like you think like they're shopping from here, but they're
Yeah.
really not. They're shopping from here
Yeah.
on here. That's
Exactly.
really interesting. Let,
Exactly.
let me ask you this. So brand is very important, but brand is not the end all be all for women's. But I think brand a lot of times is the end all be all for men's.
Mhm.
Men's contemporary. If you want to talk about vintage, that's different because the brand for vintage is the subject matter.
Right. Right.
But for contemporary, it's always brand. Like you can have, and I use the example of a lot of like a 1993 South Carolina motorcycle rally shirt, never gonna sell. But if it had a Harley tag, that will sell every single time. So when I go into the stores, and this puzzles me, I've never been able to figure it out. I don't know. Maybe you can, maybe you got something, maybe you don't. Every single men's brand that is expensive has some kind of a potential resale value. But there are women's brands that are tremendously expensive in the store that you cannot give away on eBay. You cannot give away on Poshmark. Like Vince. Some stuff is okay, but a lot of that stuff is not. J.
If you
Jill.
price it correctly, I actually
But
sell quite a lot of Vince.
but the price disparity is crazy.
Yes, very large.
We're
Yes.
like in the store it could be 500 bucks
Yeah.
on eBay 14.99.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not like that with men's. If it's high
Yeah.
priced in the store for men's, it's still high price on eBay. Do you
Yeah.
have any idea why brands like Vince or J. Jill can be sky high in the store, way down here on eBay?
I think there's a couple of reasons. And I want to mention one thing before I answer, and that is that there's also another thing that I have to look for that we need that people shopping for women's brands have to look for is that a brand like Vince changes their tag every few years. And so you can often tell the age of the garment by which tag is in there. So not all Vince is created equal, where more current Vince, like let's say Vince that's currently on the website or has come out in the last 2 years, is going to be much more valuable than the Vince from 10 years ago. And so part of my brand and tag knowledge is also knowing the history of each tag that I look at, so that I know that this Vince, which is the one with the white stripe on the top and bottom, is very old and is going to be really hard to move. Whereas the most recent Vince is a big white square or large rectangle with the block letters in black. That's going to be the most current Vince. And if I find that, that's going to sell for more money and quicker. So there's that. So, but in to answer your question, I think that some of it has to do with like what's trending, or like whether or not a brand has kind of run its course. So like there's some brands that are like stay popular forever. Like for example, like Lululemon, it's on a little bit of a slump right now, but in general, it sort of keeps its value year after year after year. People are continuing to buy it. Whereas some brands are really hot, and I'm talking about brands, not styles, are really hot for a moment. Maybe a lot of celebrities were wearing it. Maybe they were doing a ton of like marketing that was, that people were wearing. If celebrities were wearing it, it was coming up a lot in social media, and they had a moment, or they had a long moment, maybe 5 years or 10 years, like a brand like Joie or Equipment or Current Elliott, which are all high-end contemporary brands that you literally cannot give away right now. It doesn't matter how new they are. And the other part of that is that a lot of these brands have private labeled or licensed to off price. So Joie, for example, now is carried in TJ Maxx and Marshalls. It's a different tag, but they devalue the whole brand when they do that, because now I don't want to buy Joie because Joie is also sold in an off-price store. And maybe this silk dress was $400, but like if I really wanted, I could just buy it by style and pay like $40 for it at TJ Maxx. So there are a lot of those things that happen like over time, which I think is maybe less with men's, because men's clothing like isn't as trendy. Like men always wear jeans and t-shirts. Like men always wear some form of polos or button downs. Like, but women's the trends change so quickly, that can happen really fast, or it can happen really slowly. Like another one is like Rebecca Taylor. That's another one that can be really hard to move, that is very expensive and did really well for many, many, many years. Now there's always like outliers, like somebody might wear a thing and then that item is popular, and if I see it, I might pick it up. But in general, a lot of these brands, it's not even that they're cyclical, they've just kind of run their course. And usually what happens is if they can't pull back from that, they go away. And then you just are into whatever is more current and more popular. I also am a little bit more of an evergreen type buyer when I buy for my store. I don't buy things that are like, well, I shouldn't say I don't. I don't buy a lot of items that are very trendy, because for us, the trends can come and go so quickly that if that item doesn't sell while that trend is happening, you may sit on it forever and you may never sell it. And I don't
Sure.
want to have items that do that. So I try not to like go too deep into like really like niche type trends.
Sure. Like all the cores, like there's a new core every single week. Like by the time this podcast is released, there's going to be four cores that like have gone and come and gone. So, all right, there's a lot in that. So, like you said, like the Lululemon, it is on the grand scheme a newer brand still. I know it's been around for a while, but like on the grand scheme of thing, it's not hasn't been out here for 50 years, 40 years, things like that. So like Lululemon, they kind of carve their space in athleisure. Could that be a brand that is like, a timeless classic in athleisure, where like a brand like Aloe, maybe that one might come and go and not have the longevity of like the staple piece in it. So there's brands like that where like, they kind of carve their way. They have these other brands that try to take a piece of it, and maybe those brands stay on, maybe those brands fall off, but maybe inside of every single niche there might be something that's timeless. So all right, so when things do run the course, when things are on the downtrend, how do you know things are on the way out? So that way you stop buying them. And then I guess how do you kind of call them out of your store so that way they don't end up in your store and never selling?
So the market will tell me when it's done. And basically what I mean by that is I have an item listed and I'm continuing to get lower and lower offers on that item or on that brand as a whole, like Joie, for example, like, or it's not, I don't even get any offers at all. The pieces are in there. They've been in there for 6 months. I haven't had an offer on them. It's not going to move. So, I think that the market does kind of tell you when that brand or that thing is kind of like on the downslide. Ideally I like to stop buying it before it hits the bottom and just get rid of what I have. But as to your second part of that question, how do I get rid of those things? I actually have a couple of different avenues. First, of course, I try pricing them lower and lower and lower. I have enough room in my prices that I can actually pretty much like lower it to like nearly rock bottom and still make money, like maybe only a little bit, but and at that point, I often don't really care. I just want it to leave. And even if I get, let's say, 10 or $15 for it, that's still more than I would get like if let's say I bundled it and put it on Facebook Marketplace, which is actually not an outlet that I use. I do a couple of other things. I'm really big into trading up at buy, sell, trade. So if something isn't selling for me and I think that buy, sell, trade might take it, I will usually bag those items up and I go a few times, a year, maybe every couple of months, to buy, sell, trade. And then I always take credit and I use that to buy better, newer, maybe trendier, more trendy items. I also have outlets in other states where I take things where the trends may have come and gone here in LA, or even in like the fashion industry at a whole. Maybe it hasn't made it quite yet to the middle of the country. Like they're just starting to see some of those trends. So, and maybe they're not buying online as much, but I have a consignment store that I take stuff to. And again, I take that in trade. So I keep a credit there and then I shop there a couple of times a year and I use that money to buy better items. Last stop for me would be like donation, but the truth is I don't even really end up donating much, because I also have a group of ladies I am friends with, and we do a clothing swap twice a year. So I will take those items a lot of times to our swap, and I will take home with me items either for myself or to sell. And they all know what I do. I'm not like, I'm not all secretive about it. I didn't really like advertise it in the beginning because I didn't know them that well. I came to them through a friend of mine who does know what I do. And I didn't want to like offend anybody. And I was also really like conservative about what I took. I was like, I'm not just going to come here and like take everything because, that's not cool.
Yeah.
And the truth is, a lot of it is not stuff that I want anyway. But
Yeah.
usually I go home with a handful of things that I can sell. And then somebody else gets to enjoy the things that I couldn't. So there's really like not a lot of waste. I also have kind of I'm okay with a little bit of a longer sell through. So because I do a little bit of a higher dollar item. So I don't end up with like a ton of stuff that's been sitting forever. But I'm working on experimenting a little bit more with that, maybe marking things down online and stuff like that.
That's an interesting idea. So you're like in one of the fashion meccas. When stuff is on their way out, you go somewhere else where it's still in and you do the arbitrage there. That's pretty funny. So I guess like, we should all be looking at our longest tail items, maybe, on a scale of performance of sell through, our lowest performing items because we've had them the longest. And we need to assess, are these items some that we're still picking up? Because if they're taking too long to sell, we can't still be out here picking them up. So, if people out there, if they haven't kind of gone through their inventory, you can go on eBay Active Screen and you can sort by oldest and check out your oldest ones and see if there's some patterns in there. Is it certain brands aren't selling anymore? Is it certain sizes you don't have good luck with? If you sort by oldest and you have a bunch of smalls and extra smalls, then maybe we need to reconsider or figure out what's going on with that. If you sort by oldest, maybe there's a bunch of brands that a year ago, 2 years ago were selling great that have fallen out of style. And these are the ones that Rachel's talking about. Maybe, it doesn't have to be 1 year, 2 years. Maybe it could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever your threshold is for items that I've had for too long. We need to get those ones out of here because for whatever reason, they're not going to sell. Maybe they're out of style, bad brand, something's going on with them. We need to get our money back, turn a profit, or just give ourselves a better opportunity. And like you said, you've outlined, 5 or 6 good ways to, turn a small profit and give ourselves another opportunity with a better item that's more on trend here. So, it's obvious that you have a wide range of expertise, a wide range of knowledge doing this. And like you alluded to earlier, you love to shop. You're a shopper. Once upon a time, when I first met Rachel, she had a big death pile. And not a lot of people come out on the other side
Yeah.
successful, no longer death pilers. So, for the people out there, how do we get to the point where we have a death pile? Because for me, I've always had a queue, and my queue is something I guess that I'm actively working on. Like, I might have 3 weeks of hats. Great. And on the third week, I'm going to get to that last item. And then when I get to that one, hopefully I got a couple more weeks. So it kind of just keeps moving in a line. So for the death pile, how does it become a death pile rather than a queue? Are these just items that we're going to stick over here and we forget about them? We don't touch them. They're collecting dust. How do we fall into the trap of getting the death pile?
So I think it happened for me the way it happens to a lot of people, which is that I had plenty of inventory, but I was still continuing to shop because I enjoyed the act of shopping.
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier that I have ADHD, so my brain is constantly looking for dopamine, and that shopping behavior gives you a lot of dopamine. And so, I'd be driving by a thrift store and I'd go in and I still had, a pile of stuff at home to list. And what started happening was I had more than, like, let's say I could hang up. And so I started putting it into bins, and those bins were not clear. They were solid gray. And then the bins started stacking up. And then when there were too many bins in the house, I went and I rented a storage unit. And I had not a big one, but I had a smallish storage unit that was pretty full. I probably had at one point maybe 20 bins in there. And for me, out of sight, out of mind, just
Sure.
I didn't see it, it didn't exist. And I just kept shopping. And also because I shop like for personal, I would clean out my closet, and then anything that was worth selling that would get added to the death pile, and people would give me things, and maybe I usually would sort them, but then that would go into the death pile. Maybe there were things that needed repairs or extensive cleaning, or were really hard to photograph, like certain types of fabrics or jumpsuits or things like that, which are like kind of a pain to photograph. That went into the death pile, and before I knew it, and I don't know the number today. I didn't count. I think that there were times when people asked me, and it was probably very much like, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. So I don't know. I'm not going to count it because I don't want to know how many there
Sure.
are. But I will say there were thousands. There were
Wow.
thousands of pieces. Yeah. So I got myself in a pretty big hole. And my husband and I, we moved to a bigger house where I could have, like, the house we moved into, I had very specific needs for what I wanted because I knew I was going to be running two businesses out of the house, and there was a certain amount of space that I needed for each thing, and the room where I do my photography and where the unlisted inventory is housed, I couldn't even really walk in there. I was having to like move things out of the way to get to other things. I was like, making myself a little like space so that I could stand back to do my photo. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was
Yeah.
like, I mean, it just became so overwhelming that then I didn't really want to photograph. I didn't want to work because it was like, it was such a hassle to like play Jenga with like all of the
Sure.
things that I had, or Tetris, and it
Sure.
was just, and then I kept taking things to storage. So that pile kept getting bigger.
Sure.
So
And
yeah,
and you don't see it, so it's not there.
storage, it
So
doesn't exist.
so for the dopamine rush for you personally, was it just strictly just shopping, or was it like getting a deal?
Getting a deal for sure.
Getting a
Yeah,
deal.
I love shopping, but it's more the act of like, what am I gonna find that's like some crazy, like you said earlier, expensive retail piece, and now, I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna be able to sell it or keep it for myself, and I paid like $10 for it or paid five
Hmm.
dollars for it. So yeah, I
So
mean, it's very much that.
so once upon a time we had this death pile of thousands and thousands of items. How did you turn the corner, get the death pile dealt with, get it listed, turn it into the fantastic business that it is today?
So yeah, that's the age-old question, and I actually really love to share this because I think that I want people to understand that I was in all of those stages. Like, I did all of those things that everybody with a death pile has. And I went through the excuses, every time, I would buy new things, there was some reason, the other thing I did was I cherry picked when I would shop. So I would cherry pick what I wanted to list. So I wouldn't list everything that I just bought, and then I'd put the other things to the side, which was really problematic too. So, I went through that whole, everything that other people go through, like, you just the piles and piles of stuff. And like, I joined the group. I joined the group, back when, you know, uh, I joined it in what was it, 2022. And, I was at a place where, like, I was making all of this money, but I didn't have any money. And I was like, where is the money? Like, where's the money going? Like,
Hmm.
I'm making money. I make more money than anybody else I know. And like any of the other resellers I know. Like, why don't I have any money?
You're making more sales, not more money, because the money's
Yeah,
just going right back out the
right.
door.
It's going right back out
So
because
you're
I'm
making
using,
more sales than
yeah,
anybody else you
yeah,
know.
yeah. And I'd also like to add that I also ran up a fairly large credit card bill, which I've actually been really good with credit cards over the last like 10 years. I had a problem with credit cards years ago. I resolved that. But I was at a point where I was like, I had some money in savings, and so I was buying things with credit cards anticipating that I was going to use the savings to pay off the credit card each
Sure.
month. But that's not what happened. I just kept putting money on the credit card. And so, I was in this group. I was listening to you. I was listening to Chris, and like hearing all of the different things about like how to actually run a successful, profitable business. And I was looking at those things that you were teaching us and looking at what I had. And I was like, these two things don't match, right? Like, I didn't know my numbers. Like, all I knew was the total, right? I know
Yeah.
this is gross, this is net. I wasn't like, and I've been really good at like knowing how to take deductions and things like that. Cause I've actually,
Hmm.
I had my own business, another business long before I started reselling. Um, so that part of it I had a handle on, but I didn't have a handle on the cash flow part. Like, it's coming in and then this much should get allocated to savings and this much should get allocated to bills and this much should get allocated to new inventory. Like, I wasn't doing any of that. It was all just going into one account, and it was there's money in there. Okay, I'm going shopping. And so, I started really listening to the things that you guys were teaching us, doing the math and like breaking it down and really starting to assess like what I currently had going on. No more sticking my head in the sand. And, one of the big things was like, okay, I had the added expense of a storage unit. We moved into this house that is significantly larger and more expensive than the place we lived before. And so all of my expenses had gone up, but, and my sales were increasing, but I still didn't have any money.
Right.
So I took a real hard look at the situation, and it got to a point, like I said earlier, where like I had to move things out of the way to, to get to the things I needed to photograph to
Yeah.
list.
It's like work to do your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I started following a couple of different YouTubers who talked a lot about like minimalist living and decluttering. And I really was absorbing that information. Now, I'm never going to be a minimalist. I'm realistic about that. Like, it's just not who I am. Like, I like things. I like nice things. But I can honestly say today I'm less attached to things than I used to be. And if something isn't serving me, out it goes. So I took a hard look at my business. I took a hard look at like what was happening, what was going on. I started with you in the 100K call. So I had made 100K, but I didn't have any money.
Sure.
And I said, I have to turn this around. And the only way I can do that is by stopping shopping. I cannot shop anymore. But I have thousands of pieces of unlisted inventory. I have all this money in inventory that is not listed. And like you say, no one's knocking on my door to say I want that,
Yeah.
leather jacket
To
that's in the
pay the
pile in
mortgage.
the corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of work inward, I will say, because shopping addiction is a real thing. It's just like any other addiction. It's really
Sure.
hard to beat. Like, it's usually you need some kind of help. Like,
Sure.
so I did a lot of work inside, and I just was like, I can't live like this. I should have more money in savings. I need to be able to say that I have money should something happen, should there be an emergency, like, all of those things.
What was like the rock bottom final straw? Because I think a lot of people like they have this conversation and it's still like, I'll deal with that later. Like how did you make the decision to say, you know what, I'm gonna do a complete 180?
I think part of it, and I'm going to get a little personal here. I'm not going to go into too many details, but I think part of it was before I met my husband, I always had my own money. I made a very good living. I made a six-figure income, and I had, pretty good situation, but I was bad with money. I was always bad with money. I was bad with credit cards. My parents didn't teach me about money. Like, I knew that they were okay, but like, that our generation, we didn't talk about that stuff. Money was this like taboo thing. And I had then gone into the finance business and I knew more about how money worked than I ever had before. Lots about the stock market and investment products and just helping people like solve their financial problems. So now I have this tool in my toolbox. And I was looking at my business because I was doing this full time and I was looking at the amount of money my husband was making and what he was bringing in. And when we met, I actually made more money than he did. And then I had to live off of his money for a lot of
Mm.
years. And I never felt really good about that. Like because I've always had my own money. I've always worked like good jobs. I've worked really hard, and so it was really difficult for me to reconcile that part where I'm not really contributing, like my business, like I'm running this business, but like I don't have anything to show for it. So like, is it really a business? Like, so all of those things were sort of catalyst. There wasn't really one like a big thing that was like this happened and then I made
Yeah.
this decision. It was like a
No,
lot of
that's
things
huge
compounding.
though. No, that's huge though. And I think a lot of people can absolutely relate. All right, so we make this decision, we're going to turn this thing around. How did you formulate the plan? What was the plan to now extract all the money that was in your business? Because the money is there.
Yeah.
It's just not in your bank account. It
Yeah.
was in inventory that was sitting in gray totes that was sitting in an offsite storage unit. That's where your money was. And
Yep.
that's for everybody out there. The money is in your business. It's not in your bank account. It's sitting in your inventory either on eBay that's not selling or sitting in your inventory that's not listed. If we went and sold everything, we'd be liquid cash and it would be in our bank account.
Yep.
But our money is either in the bank account, listed on eBay waiting to sell, or unlisted waiting to get listed. So what were the steps or the plan to get all of that stuff listed? Because it's one thing to say, I want to turn this thing around, and then you open up that garage door at your storage unit, and now you're just punched with a monumental task.
Yeah. So there were a couple of things I did right away. Like the minute I made this decision, the first thing was obviously no more shopping. Like that's it. You cannot shop anymore. And I relapsed like a couple of times, but I will say I pretty much stuck to that like 100%. Number two was that I had to I had to gosh, let me think of how to say this. Um well, you know what? Let me go to another side. Okay, so I also had this credit card debt that was hovering over
Yes.
me, right? So I knew that the only way to do this was to stop shopping and to list what I had. So then the second thing I was like, okay, so number one, stop shopping. Number two, I had to become more consistent with my listing.
Oh,
Yeah. So I had listed a lot before, but I was kind of like up and down. Maybe I was listing, 30 items in 3 days and then nothing for a week. Or I'd shoot and photograph 70 items. I'd sprinkle them out over a couple of weeks and then I wouldn't list anything. So while I did list quite a bit. I was never consistent. I never listed every single day. I never listed a set amount every single day. So the second thing I did was I said I will be listing 10 items a day. And I want you to know I did this for you
thank you.
because at that time you were telling us how in the previous group you had offered anyone, I think it was a
A
thousand or two
thousand
thousand
dollars, a
dollars
thousand dollars if you list for the rest of the year every single
Yeah,
day.
every single day. And I knew you weren't this was like an old story you told us and I knew this wasn't a thing, but I took that into my head and I said, I'm going to be that person. I don't care about the money. I don't need the money.
Yeah.
I want to do it for
That's the
myself.
secret. If you list every single day, at the end of it, you go, I don't need the money.
I don't need the $1,000. I have way more. I have way more than $1,000.
Yeah.
But that was very much a catalyst for me. You telling us that story and then ending the story by saying no one did it, not
Nobody
one
did it.
person.
Nope.
And to me, that was like that nobody who heard that wanted to invest in themselves because the reality is you were offering the money, but that wasn't what it was about. The money was supposed to be incentive to get people to make that investment in themselves and
That's
their
right.
business.
That's right.
And yeah, and so that those were like the two biggest things. And so I was like, I'm going to do this for tech. And I don't know if I ever even told you. I
No,
think
never.
I think I just did it. And I think I told you when I was done that I hadn't, or at some point I told you I hadn't missed a single day for, whatever period of time. I might have mentioned it, but I was never really like vocal about it.
Oh,
You know,
that's interesting.
yeah,
So you got on the train, you listed 10 a day,
10 a day, every day, no matter what.
and then what happens after that to your business? So we're not shopping,
Not
we're
shopping.
listing 10 a day, high quality stuff, stuff is selling,
Right.
money's going into the bank account, we can throw some money to the credit cards, and things are trending in the right direction after that.
Yeah. So, well, here's what happened. So I made the decision to list 10 a day, right? But the stuff was everywhere. It was in bins, it was in boxes, it was in the wash, it was in the repair pile, right? It was everywhere. So I couldn't really do that until I started to sort, hang, clean, steam, whatever it was I had to do. And so I told myself that the first thing I was going to do was take all of the bins that I had in the room where I was working and move them to storage. Now, I know this sounds counterproductive, but the reality was I couldn't work because there was so much stuff in the room. And I left myself, I think, one or two bins, and they were more or less labeled. They said, like, short sleeve tops, long sleeve tops. I had one bin that was entirely Lululemon. I found 7 pairs of Fry boots that had not been listed. I mean, my
Oh my
death pile was
goodness.
full of great things, but I told myself no cherry picking. If I opened a bin, I had to deal with everything that was in that bin until I could start on the next bin. And so I would usually have two bins. I would do one, finish that one because it didn't take me that long. I had like two or three other bins that were empty in the room. And so I could sort as I went. And things that I knew were ready to be listed, so like they didn't need cleaning, they didn't need repairs, maybe they just needed a quick steam, I would hang up as much as would fit on the hanging rack because I knew if it was on the rack, it was going to get listed. And I did that one at a time. And then so there was a bin for listing, a bin for donation or garbage,
Mhm.
and then a bin of stuff that was like, well, I would say donation and garbage maybe were separate, maybe donation, and then I had some stuff that I had to throw away because it had been sitting so long that it for
Sure.
elastic
Yeah,
dries out, mystery
sure.
stains appear, moths get to things.
Right.
I did also have a moth problem in one of my storage units, so that was a big catalyst for getting this done because I was like, things are getting destroyed in storage. I mean, it was just a nightmare. The whole thing was a
Yeah.
nightmare. But I told myself every day, the how do you eat an elephant, right? I can't tackle this all at once. I have
No,
to do little bites at a time, but I can't pick and choose. If I open a box, I have to deal with that box.
that's
And
right.
then, at 10 a day, it probably went a lot quicker than I thought it would. And also there were a lot of things that I couldn't, there were also things that I think, I guess the third category for sorting was things I needed to look up because I was like, I'm not going to waste my time listing this if it's not worth anything anymore. And I
Sure.
knew there were things in there that would be the case. Like maybe it was worth something when I bought it, or my metrics have changed too. Like I have a much higher threshold for what I'm going to list. Now, granted, all this stuff was essentially for, I mean, it wasn't free, but it was there already. So, if it was worth $30 and I thought it would sell, I would list it. But, there were things in there that maybe were only worth $10. And I was like, I'm not wasting my time. It takes me too long to photograph and too long to list to spend time on a $10 item. That's going to
Hmm.
donation or
Hmm.
going to the clothing swap.
Hmm.
So I did it one at a time. And then when I got through everything that I had in the room where I was photographing, like the floor was essentially clear, I would go to storage and I'd bring home two more bins. And I did it this, I wouldn't take, everything I could. I would bring two bins home and I would tackle those bins and so on and so forth. And I slowly started to see the bins disappearing from storage.
Wow.
When I got down to like 4 bins, I was like, I'm done. I don't need storage anymore. I gave up the storage unit. I brought those bins home and that was it. I was like, okay. And the crazy thing is, this is so I'm going to tell you two crazy things that happened. The
Okay.
first crazy thing that happened was I paid off that 5 figures of credit card debt in 3 months.
Nice.
The first 3 months of the year.
Congratulations.
It
That's
was paid
great.
off in March.
Wow.
That was, yeah, yeah. I don't want to tell you the number, but it was a lot. It was 5 figures. So that was the first thing, which meant everything after that was gravy, right?
That's
Because
right.
all this inventory was already paid for. I wasn't shopping. There was no more. I actually paid off all of my debt. So all the credit cards, the only thing that I carried debt on is my car, and that's it. So it was the first time in my life that was like 100% debt free. And oh my God, that felt so good. Like
Wow.
really gratifying, that part of it. And my credit score card started going up again. And it was just so gratifying. But then, of course, the other thing that happened was like all this money was like coming into my bank account. And I'd like when I was selling on eBay, I had my daily payouts. And sometimes I
Yeah.
wouldn't check my account for like a week or two. And I'd open it up and I'd be like, where
Whoa.
did all this money? It was crazy. It was crazy. And then the other thing that happened was there were a lot of items in my death pile that were actually worth a lot of money. And
Sure.
the one story I love to tell is I actually bought a bulk buy quite a few years ago, but that was a lot of what was in my death pile because it was several storage units that someone purchased or not purchased, they were given to her, and she was trying to sell on Poshmark, and she had a job and she had a 3-year-old, and she was just like, I can't do this anymore. And there was a local group, and she posted in that group, if anyone is interested, I have all of these clothes. I'd like to just sell them all to one person. And she lived like one town over. And I was like, I'm interested. I gave her some of my, I think I maybe shared like my Poshmark closet with her just so she could see that I was like legit and that I was not like gonna, rob her something crazy. So we agreed to meet. I went to her apartment and she had racks and racks of clothing that came out of a celebrity storage unit. And she was like, I just want to sell all of this. And I was like, okay, let me look through it because I have to make sure that this is going to be, worthwhile for me to just take it all. And so, I was there for about an hour. I kind of just looked through some things I had to like comp. It was a lot of very small sizes, but I sell a lot of small sizes. So I wasn't too worried about that. And I just made her an offer and I took it all. And she also gave me like a mannequin and then rolling racks. And then when she moved, she gave me everything that was left, all the things. I mean, so it was a relationship I had developed, over a few months. She sold me other things later that like her old boss who worked for like a very high-end brand, like had given her. So like I just kept buying from her. And the storage units that belonged to the celebrity, that celebrity was very into vintage clothing. She really loved vintage. And there was a lot of things in that pile that had tags on them from a vintage store in LA that is very high end. It's like where like, people go to look for really high end vintage. And it was a jumpsuit. It was 100% polyester. It literally looked homemade. It looked like someone's grandma sewed it for them, like for like a costume. It was like a peacock print jumpsuit with these balloon legs. It was like elastic and it looked like it was this big. It didn't photograph well. And, so it sat there in my death pile for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. And I pull it out, and the tag on it from the store in LA was $550. And I didn't know what to list it for. So I did some comps. I couldn't find the exact item to begin with, but I did find
Sure.
other items from the brand. And the resale was very high. Like there were pieces on Etsy for like over $1,000. And so I started to do a little more research. And then I found the jumpsuit had sold on First Dibs and like years ago. And, First Dibs is mostly like real high end stuff. So I
Hmm.
was like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to list it at 550. The store had it marked at 550. So
Sure.
I listed it at 550. And pretty much within hours, I got an offer for 375. And based on the comps I'd been looking at, that was kind of low. Like this brand was selling for like 5, 6, 7, 800, 1,400, $2,000. And I feel like even at 550, I probably undersold it. But so I sent them a message and I was like, thanks so much for your offer. But I just listed this and I know it's kind of a high demand brand. Is there any way you'd be willing to, come up a little bit? And I'm laying and I didn't hear back. And I'm laying in bed and it's 11 o'clock at night and I get the equivalent of a cha-ching,
Sure.
basically on eBay. Um, the jumpsuit has sold at full price
Full price.
to the same
Wow.
person,
There you go.
person who sent me the offer.
And that thing was
And
sitting
wait,
around for years.
it went back to the city, to LA, to to the middle of LA. It was insane. It was
Full
insane.
circle.
Yeah. So that said to me, like, oh my God, this thing has been sitting in my death pile for 2.5 years, and I could have had that money. So after that, it was just like I was like, I'm going full force. I did shop like maybe 2 or 3 times, but it was only because there were opportunities that I knew I wasn't going to have again for maybe a year or if ever. And so I was like, that I can justify that. I had cash flow now, so it wasn't like I
Hmm.
had to put it on a credit card. But yeah, so it took me 9 months though. 9 months. And I still have handbags. That's the only thing. So that's the last thing that I'm working on now, which I keep putting that in my goals every week, every month to
So
to to
for
do the
for
handbag.
9 months, there was no more, oh, there's a thrift store.
No.
How did you just go home?
I think what I did was I focused the desire to shop into the
Desire to
desire
sell.
to list.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just told myself, and I made peace with the listing process in that time because I really hated listing. I hated photographing. I was never satisfied with my photos. I was never satisfied with my listings. Like, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Nothing was ever good enough. And then I kept remembering this thing that Sheryl Sandberg says, the CEO of Facebook. And, she's written a number of books. A lot of them are focused on like women in business. She always says done is better than perfect.
Sure.
So I took that to heart. Between that and watching the money rolling in and just saying, you know what, I have stuff to list at home and I don't need to go to that thrift store. I broke the cycle and I stopped having that burning desire. I was actually just telling somebody this yesterday, that I just I don't have that burning desire to go to the store anymore. In fact, some weeks I'm like, "Ugh, I gotta go sourcing because I don't have any
Yeah.
inventory. I really want to
Some
go."
weeks just let me just stay home and list all day. Like it's so much better than running around all day trying to
Yeah,
find
it's
stuff.
exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I can say that like were there times when it wasn't hard? I mean, or when it was hard? Like, yeah, there were times where it was really hard. It was like, I don't want to put up these 10 listings today. Or I did social things all day and now it's 11 o'clock at night and I've not launched my listings, but I said, I'm not going to let tech down. You didn't know this, but I said, I'm not going to let tech down. Those 10 listings are going up, even if I have to stay up till 2 a.m. to do it. And I did it.
Sometimes that's what it takes
I
sometimes
did it.
because if you miss once, you'll miss again.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is that one time, like you said, you broke the cycle the first time. If you break that cycle the second time, then maybe you fall into the other direction. So I think that the way that you dealt with the death pile is whenever anyone asks me, that's kind of the same thing that I say is that we can't touch the item 100 times. We need to open up a bin and say, this is eBay worthy. This
Yeah.
is garage sale, flea market, donate, whatever you want to do. And this is not worth my time to list, and I need to put this somewhere. We can't no longer have death pile and then still a maybe pile. It needs to have a decision made once we open up that bin. And then once that decision is made, then it's out the door, then it's gone. So did your draft bank play any role into not missing, or you didn't roll a draft bank?
I did actually for a long time. I had a 2 week draft bank. And because that was the other thing I really took to heart, like because I knew I didn't want to miss. If there was a situation where like I knew I had to go out of town and I wasn't gonna be able to photograph. So I actually built the draft bank pretty early on. And also I was processing so much stuff all the time. And some days, I might be able to photograph like 30 or 40 items and I would just
Mhm.
do them all. And then maybe 2 days later, I'd do another batch like that, which was more than enough for, however many days. And so I just was banking everything. Like I did pretty much what you guys suggested. Like everything just went into the draft bank. And then it was first in, first out. So like I just listed from the oldest things first, just the 10 I needed to do that day. I could have there are times I could have listed more, but I wanted to know, I wanted to do something that I knew I could like complete every day. And I also didn't want to like flip flop and I didn't want to be like 12 today and 10 tomorrow and 20
Right.
the next. Like I needed the structure of like 10 a day. It was like 10 a day because that was like when I would get that 10, no matter what, like I was like, okay, I could stop now. And so I actually had a draft bank of over 2 weeks, and there were a lot of times where I was able to go out of town. I was able to, go away for the holidays to my in-laws or to my parents or what have you. And I still maintain that 10 a day no matter what, because I was not leaving on my trip without enough listings to cover the trip.
That's right.
Like it was a non-negotiable for me at that
Mm.
point. Like what you say, like it became like it's not I'm going to try. That's the other thing. I never said I'm going to try. I'd read Atomic Habits too, and I was like, you can't say you're going to try. You just need to become the person that does
Right.
the thing.
Right.
I do this every day. And I kept saying, I list 10 a day, not I'm thinking about listing 10 a day,
Sure.
not I'm going to try to list 10 a day. I list 10 a day. That's what I do. I list 10 a day. And it became like now I wouldn't even dream of like going lower or missing a day or, I list 10 a day. That's what I do,
That's it.
and so. it became much easier over time. So yeah, so the draft bank was really important. And then like I used it up at one point and like I have struggled a little bit to get it back up, but actually now I'm at about 180 and my goal was for 3 weeks. And once I get to 3 weeks, I'm actually going to increase my listing goal for the first time in a year and a half.
To what?
But that part I haven't decided yet.
Oh, what
Originally
are
I
you
was thinking
thinking
I would
about?
go, well, I was going to go to 12, but that seems kind of, I don't know. I don't want to jump up too much. So I'll say I'm going to go to 12 for sure, but I may go up as much as 15 to 15. So it's going to depend on how much I'm able to source, like as long as I can get enough inventory. And then also like I am working with a virtual assistant. So depending on how quickly she can work, if she can work quickly, I will do more. So I will go with the 15 if I can see that like she can process enough for me.
And what about space wise? You'd be all right at 15?
So that's the only other issue. Because I actually when we went through the space exercise,
Hmm.
I actually um I didn't account for one thing in here and it's actually staring right at us. It's this attic which has stairs
Mine's
that get
blocked
pulled
too. I
down.
didn't think about that either. Mine's blocked
Yeah.
too.
So as it stands right now, every time my husband or I need to get up there, we have to sort of lean on these shelves to be able to
Yeah.
pull those down. But that also means I can't put more shelving here, which originally I thought I could.
Could
So
could you maybe put it on wheels?
I actually have thought of that, but my husband and I actually were down here a couple of days ago. We were because I said, "Come with me. I want to brainstorm with you how I can get more stuff in this room." I'm actually going to buy. I don't. The shelving that's back here is actually one shelf higher than these, so I'm going to switch. I have a very high ceiling in here, so I'm going to switch these to the taller ones, and that will give me two extra shelves. I'm going to add a whole other one of these. I do have a room. And then I'm going to shift some things around. And then I may move my entire workstation, like for listing, into the room I do the
The other room.
photography in. And that will give me actually the space that I'm sitting in right now. Potentially, I could even put another rack here. I'm also going to reduce the size of my shipping table to get a couple more racks in here. So this room will get fuller. But I could probably fit, I mean, I think I could fit another 1,000 items in here, maybe more, because these shelves actually fit quite a lot. If I'm doing just clothing, but there are shoes, like one of these racks is all shoes. So
Hmm.
um, I've run out of shoe space. So that's kind of like I need to get this done like in the next couple weeks. But that's the only other thing is, and I think what I'd like to work on is my sell-through rate too, because if I can increase my sell-through rate, then I won't have a storage problem. If my sell-through rate kind of stays where it is, I may have to move into other space, which I really would like to keep everything at home if I can.
But what's the concession that you're going to make to increase sell-through? Is it going to be pick up better products, which means more time on the road looking for stuff, or is it reduce the price a little bit, or maybe increase promoted listings, or decrease the profit, the margin slightly?
Kind of all of those, and I do apologize. My gardeners are here, and I
Can't
don't know
hear
if you
him.
can hear that. Okay.
No.
Um, it's kind of all of those things. I think one is maybe do some sort of regular aged inventory markdown, which I don't really do right now. I've run a couple of sales which weren't really particularly successful, unfortunately. So I don't think that like price maybe is the issue if people are not buying it at 30 or 40% off. I actually do. I did start doing quarterly a 40% off sale in my Poshmark closet, which usually generates quite a lot of sales at once. So I am implementing that. I may do it more than quarterly. The issue is that like it won't go out to the same people if it's less than 90 days because that's how the Poshmark system works, but it'll go to new people. So there's that. I do want to start utilizing more of the eBay tools. I haven't really done that. I actually don't promote at all right now on eBay. So that's something that's actually on my to-do list for very soon is to figure out how to do that. I think I just want to start promoting everything at like, maybe 2 weeks after I list it or something like that. So there's that. And then yes, spending more time on the road will definitely be a big part of that because like in the call yesterday, and I actually spoke with Thomas a little bit after the call. We talked a little bit about the fact that like, with my extensive brand knowledge and my ability to just kind of find things that I probably need to spend more time sourcing just so that I can get more inventory. And so a lot of that again will depend on like if my virtual assistant can handle the listing part, that will actually free me up to spend more time doing the thing I'm really best at, which is the sourcing. So because right now, I mean, this is crazy. So right now, I source only once a week,
That
and
is crazy.
that gets me enough for usually an entire week, sometimes more, because I may source
Wow.
anywhere from 80 to 100 pieces on that one
Of
day.
high quality stuff, not just
No.
not just picking up anything. That's
No, I
pretty
may throw
amazing that
in
you
like
could
some
do
free
that.
people pieces that are not like high dollar, but that I know will sell quickly and
Yeah,
stuff like that. But like, no, all high quality. Yeah.
that's good. So all right. So what does the ideal business look like for you down the line?
Now that's $1 million question, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Literally. Um, I don't know that I want like a really huge operation. I don't know that my brain would be able to manage that. But I do want it to be bigger than it is now, but maybe not a lot bigger. Like I think that what I've thought a lot about is like if I could maintain the size of my store or maybe just increase like a little bit. Let's say keeping it under 5,000 items, but increase my sell through and increase the quality of product. I think that would be ideal. And then maybe get to like half a mil, doing that. I mean, after talking to Thomas, again, it was that was an amazing conversation for me because that is how his store works. And so, because I always wondered, I was like, is my business model, is it sustainable? Like, is it scalable? Because of the quality of the product that I like to source and that I want to have, like I've gotten to a point where there are really almost no exceptions to that. Like, even if I know an item will sell, if it doesn't meet the metrics that I have set for my, store in conversations with you, and now that's like my, these are the rules for my business, it stays at the store. It like I just put it back on the rack. That's it. So, I guess I have to see once I start like really spending a lot of time sourcing. Though I honestly like don't think it'll be a problem because when I do that one day of sourcing, most of the time it's all in one store, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
But there's so many more stores here. There's so many
Right.
sources here that like if I had like like a thrift route like you had and I had like a rotation where I was going
Sure.
to like all of these stores regularly, I could probably and then not have to do the drafting part. I could just spend all my time rotating around these stores and doing photography you know, and I think I can grow it bigger. Like yesterday was like a really like and I had an epiphany to the call
When
yesterday.
we
I
were
really
talking about
did.
Thomas. So for people that don't know, Thomas, when
Yeah.
I made one post on Instagram back in 2019, he was the very first person to sign up for the group. And it's good and bad because Thomas is Thomas. So that's
Yes.
the bad part. The good part is the guy does fantastic.
Yeah.
Like over $1 million fantastic. And it's so nice that the very first person who signed up for the group, who's still here, grew his business from 100,000, couple 100,000 to well over $1 million. Like I take a lot of pride in that. On the other side, Thomas is Thomas.
I know.
So it's good and it's bad, but I try to focus on the good.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Like take the parts of
yeah,
him that are like really excellent and use the because that's what I've done too. It's like he is a wealth of knowledge and he
yes,
asks really like tough questions, like
yeah.
which really make you think. And I think that's what happened for me yesterday. Like there were a couple of things he said, he was pretty much on his best behavior yesterday. There were a couple of things he
He
said.
did that for me, and I wrote him the best thank you note after that. I said, Thomas, I really appreciate it
Yeah.
because he's such a wealth of information, and the no filter is good because he's not afraid to ask the questions. He's not afraid to beat around the bush. He'll be direct and he'll tell you, and that's really really he has that
Yeah.
wonderful attribute. But so we talked to him yesterday. You guys asked him a bunch of questions, and I'm really thankful that he decided to share because when you start doing well, sometimes you get very protective. You don't really want to share a bunch of stuff. I get it. Trust me, I get it. And just him, like I said, the first member that was in the group built his business to over $1 million. He's doing great, still has a great work-life balance, and so he's mission accomplished. He's doing great. But so I guess you talked to him and had some stuff to ponder on. It's only been about 36 hours, but it sounds like you have some thoughts in the right direction. So that's great.
I think for me too, there are a lot of things about this business that I love, but there's also a lot of things I don't want to say that I don't like them. It's just that like with my own, my neurodivergent brain and some of my physical limitations because I have some back problems, I have to be realistic about what I can and cannot do and also like what my strengths are. And I've always tried to do everything like what you do. And I look at your work ethic and like the empire that you've built and and I'm always amazed by it, but I also know that your brain works very differently than my brain, just like everybody is different, right? And while I'd love to have your brain, I have to be more realistic about what I can and cannot do. And I think that because I'd also sent you a message after the call and like I know that like hiring VAs can be a sticky situation, they can mess up your store, like they can make a lot of mistakes. I got extremely lucky because I got someone who is already trained, who's in the US, who I can communicate with daily, if hourly if I need to, who I didn't have to like give a lot of guidance to and like train from the ground up. She already knows how to do title structure. She already knows how to write descriptions. I've got templates for everything, so I made it as easy as I possibly can for her. And so I know while I know that it's not always ideal, yes, and I wish I could just do everything myself. It's that is the part that takes me the longest. Drafting, it takes me a very long time, and I think it's because it's this very kind of cerebral, like, and kind of boring thing. And my brain is like always going, and so my brain is like going over here while like my hands are trying to do this, and it's just like the things don't really go together. And I've made it work as best as I can, but after talking to Thomas and just realizing that like, and thinking about it even before the call, it's like I've been sort of racking my brain lately, like how I want to make this bigger. I mean, yes, I'm making good money, and I'm my stretch goal for this year was $200,000. I think it's going to probably remain a stretch goal, unfortunately, but you know, but I kept thinking like, what can I actually do to get bigger, to make more money, but in a manageable way? Like, I don't want to do it too fast. I don't want to do it in a way where things get messy and get,
Right.
mistakes start getting made and that kind of a thing. I really take that to heart when you talk about that, and I'm really cognizant of it. And, yes, every listing my VA is doing, she's not pressing the blue button. I do that. I review every single listing before I launch it. So far, they've been pretty spectacular, better than mine. So, I just started thinking about like, okay, what if I just have her draft everything and I just spend, more days a week? I don't think I'll need to spend 7 days a week, but more days a week sourcing. I do some online sourcing too. So like I like doing that, and I feel like I never really have enough time for that. And I think there's deals to be found there too. So like it's been like I'm continually thinking like there's always stuff going on up here. And I am pretty hyper focused on the business. Like I actually put my other business completely on pause for the last year and a half, which was really there were people who were really disappointed by that because I am a metalsmith and I make jewelry, and I've always had this creative side, but I wanted to give this my 100% undivided attention and see what it could do. And, from 2022 to 2023, I doubled my business, and I did not make less money. I made more profit. My profit margin actually a little bit more or about the same. Um, but I sold a lot more items, and it was huge. So now it's kind of like plateaued, and I'm starting to think again about like what are the next steps to making it bigger, and what order should I do them in, and without making mistakes, like all of those things. So like that's a lot of what I'm thinking about these days. And I am starting to get a little hankering for being creative and making jewelry again, but I'm pretty dedicated to this. Like I probably work a little too much because like I never I never do anything else, but
I was
yeah.
kind of talking with Hanley about this yesterday, and that, taking the plateau is okay because the money's still going in the bank. Our expenses remain the same. We're still selling. We're just saving money at this point. But Hanley, she used the word stagnant. And raise the issue to the word stagnant because stagnant means that nothing is happening.
Right.
But that it's not true. Every single day something is happening. Every single day our store is netting items. Every single day, like just by me being consistent and just listing the same amount every single year, my business would improve by 30% profit, 30% profit because your store does grow. So like just by kind of plateauing, our business is still increasing and we're still going to make more profit at the end of the day because default, we're never going to list more items than we sell.
Yeah.
Never. So your store is going to grow. It just takes time to compound and get there. But I think that, you're reaching the same point, which was the point that I had with Hanley yesterday, is that when we're in grow mode, we're working, 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 working. When we're in the plateau mode, we're working, working, working. We
Yeah.
can't work and work at the same time. So like when Hanley was asking me like, well, you plateaued for a long time and you grew like this and I'm like, yes, because when I plateaued, I turned on the computer, I put my hands on the keyboard, I put my headphones in. It was me right here, and I sat here and I thought and zoned out and did my listings for months at a time, making the next plan for what I'm going to do next. Because when we're running around here trying to grow our business, trying to put this, trying to figure this out, trying to put out this fire, this is breaking because our business is growing. We're not working here.
Yeah.
So we need to have these kind of separate times, and it's okay to plateau for a little bit, take a step back and look at your business from over here rather than just your business right here, computer to computer, and work here. And what Hanley gathered from that conversation is that thinking is work too.
Yeah.
So, like, as business owners, like she said, we get rewarded for doing the work, doing the work. But this is also a form of work that we have to do for business owners. And we can't do this work if we're always busy doing this work.
Yeah.
So I think it comes in different stages.
And to your point, I actually want to say something that I think is pretty important for people to hear is that we get to a point where we're really impatient and we want things to go faster. And this was actually a big thing when I was doing, tackling my death pile. Like, in the beginning and even a lot of times during the process, I was just like, man, I wish this would just go faster. But I had to keep telling myself that it will get done when it gets done. And as long as I keep the amount of dedication I have to solving this and to dealing with it, it will get done. And it doesn't have to be done today or tomorrow or next week. It will get done when it's done. And as long as I keep on that path, because I'm the kind of person like, if I start something and it's not something that like I get distracted from, I want to do it until it's done. And I like the satisfaction of completion. But I
Mhm.
also for me and in general with people with ADHD, we're natural procrastinators. And so a deadline is helpful, right? So if we have something we know it has to get done by this date, we might leave it all till the night before, but it's going to get done for that date, right? So with the death pile, I didn't have like there was no end date. Like I didn't know how long it was going to take. And maybe if I had said, okay, I'm going to get this done in 6 months, I would have the problem is the other reason why I didn't do that was because I knew I'd put it off and then try and I'll do it in the last
At the
two
same
weeks. And I was
time,
like,
yeah.
I know that that's not going to happen. So I have to look at this problem from a different place. And I think that now that I don't have the death pile to deal with, I keep reminding myself the same thing in my business is that I can grow it, I can change it, I can evolve it, but it doesn't have to happen today or tomorrow or next week. But all the things that I do, like, just having this conversation about like, how am I going to solve this inventory problem? Like, if I just take care of that one thing in the next 3 or 4 weeks, that is one step forward. It's not like exciting and maybe it doesn't really like make me any more money, but it is a part of a building block of my business. And I think the other thing too is like I spend a lot more time thinking about the right way to do things instead of doing them and then having to do them again. Like
Mhm.
so the thinking part that you were talking about, like I mean, I'm a born thinker anyway, but I tend to get distracted even in my head. So I might be thinking about one thing and 10 minutes later I'm thinking about something else. But now I'm giving myself more grace with the things I do think about. And if I'm thinking about my business, I'm telling myself it's okay to keep thinking about this. Like,
Yeah,
because eventually, like, and like you told Arwen, like, it'll happen. You'll figure it out. You'll
you'll
figure it
figure it
out,
out.
right?
That's right.
But I don't want to like rush to figure it out, do it wrong, and then have to do it again,
Yeah.
because that costs time and money. So
All
I've,
the questions Arwen asked me, thousands of questions. I answered thousands of questions. The best answer that I gave him was, "You'll figure it out."
yeah,
And that's all of us. We will all figure it out. It'll work out when it's ready to work out. It might not be ready to work out today, but when it's time to work it out, you'll put yourself in the position and you'll figure it out. And the code of "you'll figure it out" is you're just gonna do it. Like
yeah,
you're gonna find a way to get it done. You're gonna find a way to make it happen. So, Rachel, I had a great time talking to you today. I have one final question.
yes.
You were licensed financial advisor doing all this stuff. How crazy did they think you were when you said, "I'm going to sell online"?
I actually didn't tell them.
You didn't tell them?
No, I couldn't. So what happened so when you're a licensed financial advisor, you can't work in another business unless it's approved by your broker dealer. And there
Sure.
there are not a lot of things that they will approve
True.
because they consider it a conflict of interest,
Sure.
that kind of a thing. So I will say between you, me, and the lamppost, I dabbled a little bit for probably 6 to 9 months. And when I saw that it was working, I didn't even tell them why I was leaving.
Well,
Actually
just
what
the
happened was,
people around you, how do you tell them, say, "Hey, I'm going to
oh,
sell
well,
online for a living"?
I think a lot of people actually were like, oh, well,
That makes
that
sense.
makes a lot of sense.
I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it.
When I went into finance, they were like, that doesn't seem
That
right.
that was that was more of a stretch that I'm going to sell
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, because I'm not like a real cerebral person. Like I'm cerebral in the way that like my brain is like constantly thinking in sort of more creative ways. Like I'm a creative person. I've made art my entire life. And like you don't think of as like somebody who's an artist, like, you know, becoming like a financial advisor. Like it's
Sure.
just weird. Those things don't really go
Sure.
together. But I had like a deep background in sales. So like, a lot of being a financial advisor is selling things. And I
Sure.
was like, well, I could sell this or sell that. It doesn't matter. You just tell me what to sell and how to sell it and I'll figure it out. But I think that people were more more surprised by that than me going, yeah. I think people were surprised that I didn't find success in it. And I think that the reason I didn't find success at least, first of all, it wasn't happening fast enough for me, but also like I loved the creative part of the job, which was helping people solve their financial problems. But I
Mhm.
spent 20% of my time doing that and 80% of my time doing paperwork, which I hate.
Sure. Sure.
So, yeah, it was kind of an easy decision. I just had to make sure that it was viable, like I could actually make
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah. Well, it seems like the right decision, like we've been talking about. You've come a long way. I'm super duper proud of you. I enjoy the questions that you do ask. I enjoy the conversation that we do have. I enjoy the Poshmark call 110%. I love the brands. You are very knowledgeable, very skilled, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate everything that you do. And I guess leave the folks with some fine words. If you wanted to find you somewhere, now's the time. But I just want to let you know that I appreciate you and everything that you've done and the transformation that you've done for your business and for yourself. You are a different person than who I met a long time ago. So very proud of you.
thank you. I mean, I also want to thank you because I for sure would not be anywhere near where I am without you, without the original group, without this group. I mean, this group probably really much more. Um, you know, I mean, obviously, I can't give you all the credit. I did the work,
Of
but
course.
to me, you were like I mean, you were my mentor through the whole thing, whether you knew it or not. Like, I mean, it was just very much like I don't want to let Tech down, even if Tech doesn't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to let him down. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for the opportunity. And I thank you for the opportunity to coach that call every week. Like,
Yep.
I mean, every time someone comes to me and says, I just love your calls, I learned this or I learned that, I get like DMs like you talked about this and then I went and I found
Mm-hmm.
it and like
Mm-hmm.
it's so gratifying. It's
Yep.
so gratifying. So I mean, I have to also say thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that
And
because
when we were going to start that call, I said, "Does anyone want to do it?" I secretly was hoping you would step forward, and you did.
yeah, yeah, and I'm glad. So thank you. But yeah, so I'm Raise Rack pretty much everywhere. RAESRACK, all one word, on Instagram, on Poshmark, on eBay. And yeah, I'm just just plugging along. I'm not a big social media person, but like, if somebody sends me a message, I will respond. But thank you again. I
Likewise.
appreciate everything that you do for me every day, whether you know it or not. You know, tech's always back there, and it's, all the techisms, like all of them, that they're always in operation. So thank you.
I appreciate you, and your success is important to me, and I'm glad that you're finding success. So thanks so much, Rachel, for coming on here, having tough discussions, a little bit vulnerable, talking about death piles and stuff like that. And I think it's really, really, really going to be really relatable and help a lot of people. So I appreciate you, giving some tips on how to overcome this. And, proud of you, doing a great job. So thank you for being here. As always, be great. Thank you.
Thank you.